I just feel like that was not a very professional way to conduct myself as a bookkeeper. That was always kind of like embarrassing or a little cringy. Sorry about that. As you read in the title, today I'm going to talk about embarrassing confessions of myself as a bookkeeper. And I'm not sure if you guys are going to think these are embarrassing or not, but please let me know in the comments the mistakes and the embarrassing things you have done, mistakes you have made to make me feel better. Because, I don't know, this might be cliche, but I had this video idea on my board for so long, and I never really wanted to make this video just because I was like, I don't really want to admit all my mistakes and embarrassing moments. But here you have it. Hopefully these will be helpful and encouraging to you to know that you're not alone if you do something that is not the best. All right, so here they are in no particular order. I feel like number 3 is probably the worst. So the first one is I spent an embarrassing amount of time researching this one problem. So when I took on a new client when I was starting out, the undeposited funds were a huge mess. So they had been putting things into undeposited funds, but then not taking them out of it, basically. And I didn't really know what to do in this situation. So I spent so long, you guys, so long researching this, days and days and days. I watched tons of YouTube videos about it, and I was not really confident enough to just make a decision and move on. I will tell you the solution for that problem if you're interested. So what I ended up doing is I tried to find and match any of the ones that I could, but most of them I couldn't because there were so many and it had been going on for so long. So I basically just deposited them all in one lump, deposit, and then I did a zero entry. I think it was a journal entry that would zero that out. So you could see both those in the books, but it didn't actually affect the bank account. And I wrote kind of a long email to the accountant so they would know exactly what was happening and what I did and why I did it. But even as I was encountering that problem, I was just so mad at myself because this is taking so long. All of this research, all of this studying, there's different accounts or different opinions about what you can do. So in hindsight, I wish that I had not spent so much time on that. All right, confession number 2 is when I wanted to quit. And I think this is part of a normal part of any job you have. But I worked occasionally for this accountant that I know, and he would give me, projects, one-off projects. And I mean, logically, it was the projects that he didn't want to do. And so he gave me this giant box, it might have been 2 boxes of paper. And I had to input all of that paper line by line, very, I would consider old school bookkeeping maybe, no bang feeds, nothing. I think we were catching up a bunch of years in the past. And I looked at the box, I was like, okay, yeah, I can do that. I was all gung-ho and I was like, okay, I'm a new bookkeeper, I'm learning, this will be a good experience. And then I just saw, I would do it month by 1 month at a time, and I just saw these months slowly trickling by, getting done at a snail's pace. And I was like, no, I just want to quit. I do not want to finish this project. I would say it was a good learning experience. I learned what I do not like doing. All right, and number 3, this is when I feel like I maybe shouldn't even admit in bookkeeper circles, but I used to not reconcile. So again, I had all this training, all this book knowledge, and then I started applying it to the real world. And I worked a lot in QuickBooks Desktop when I first started too. What I would do instead is just check that the bank balance matched. And, I can see the logic behind this because that's kind of what reconciling is. Now I know it's important to actually do that function to kind of close out the month. Especially when I switched from QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online, I was like, everything's feeding in from the bank. Why do I have to do this extra, triple check that, everything fed in correctly? And, now in my experience, I do have cases where sometimes, I catch something during reconciliation. Maybe a check was input wrong, either by me or by the person who wrote it, and then the checks don't match, or, there's problems that happen within reconciling. And I think I would catch those just by double checking the bank balance. And I would check it pretty regularly, multiple times a month. I'd be like, okay, we have $80,000 and 2 cents in here, and then $80,000 and 2 cents in the bank. So I don't think I'm totally screwed up anything, but I just feel like that was not a very professional way to conduct myself as a bookkeeper. All right, number 4, embarrassing confession. I used to hate QuickBooks Online. So I did the switch from desktop to online, and I almost didn't ever want to work. I started out having 1 client in online, And that was my least favorite client because I just hated logging into QuickBooks Online. It is a different feel. And now I work exclusively in QuickBooks Online. And I think just business has shifted that way. Let me know in the comments if you work in desktop as well sometimes. There are some diehard people who, really prefer one or the other. Now, just because of cloud services and access and accessibility, I like online better, but I really did hate it at the beginning. All right, number 5, I used to watch shows while I did bookkeeping. I haven't done that recently. I don't know what the difference is exactly, but like that client I was talking about, my first client on QuickBooks Online, I hated QuickBooks Online. It seemed a little more mindless too, that I could just, something about it was very mindless, so I could like just do it, and it was boring to me. So I would just have like a show on in the background like next to me, and it would kind of entertain me while I was doing this boring work. So I don't know. Does anyone else do that? All right, number 6, messing up people's books, making mistakes. So I have done this, not on a terribly drastic scale. And most things that you do in QuickBooks can be, fixed, switched. I know I have set up maybe a bank account wrong and fed a bunch of stuff into the bank accounts, and then I don't know if it's still like this, you had to delete every single one individually. So maybe I put like 50 things in there, and then I would have to go back and delete 50 things, like go edit, delete, edit. So that was a pain. And then the other story I wanted to tell about messing up and just kind of being embarrassed about it is when I worked in an office that I've talked about before. I worked in the same room as an accountant, so she was kind of like my boss. And so any mistake I made, so I was just there once a week and she was there a couple of times a week. So I would come in on Wednesday and like start my day, and then she would have often like a mistake I made or a problem. So she would always print out the problem. Like she'd be like, oh, you made this deposit wrong, or you put this number in wrong or something. And then, it would be my job to fix it, which I am glad that she didn't just fix it for me, because that was a learning experience. And I feel like I'm making myself look really bad. That was always kind of like embarrassing or a little cringy when she would be like, okay, here's a printout of the mistake you made. I'm like, oh, sorry about that. All right, number 7, embarrassing confession, is that I used to do payroll incorrectly. So when you do payroll, you don't want to record just the amount that hits the bank account. There's more complexity to that. And so I think I did it wrong for a while until I figured out this complexity. So you need to account for the gross amount, and then there's taxes taken out, and then there's the net amount at the bottom. So all that needs to go into QuickBooks, which is probably why I am an advocate of using payroll systems now, or payroll companies, because there's a lot of little things you have to remember for payroll, and the laws are changing sometimes. So if you don't want to keep up on all the payroll laws and all the rules, then a payroll company might be the way to go. Then it just links into QuickBooks, and then they provide this complex journal entry that has all that information that I'm talking about. So kind of embarrassing that it took me a little bit to figure that out. All right, and number 8, I am embarrassed that I used to work for any client, no matter how bad, and going along without anyone who would pay me any amount, pretty much. All right, I can just think of a few examples. One really nice lady who wanted to hire me, but I could tell she didn't have any money really. Like she wasn't really paying herself. So I just kind of continued along the process until eventually, she was like, oh, actually I can't pay you, which I kind of had realized earlier. So I'm embarrassed to say that I didn't address that sooner. Another person who wanted me to do bookkeeping for their personal accounts, and I think kind of also their business. It was kind of a messy, tricky situation that I eventually did end up just like walking away from, but it was just kind of like a weird situation. And the other one, I met with this person and I could just tell pretty much within the first 10 minutes that it wasn't going to be a good fit. I just think we had totally different vibes, and I think he was a little more on the like bending the rules side and I was not, and I could tell it wasn't going to mesh. But again, I am embarrassed to say I just kept like pursuing that client, and I never said no. And eventually I think he did not hire me. Maybe he probably felt the same vibe that we weren't going to work out. But I think at that point I didn't have like the strength to say like, no, this isn't going to work out. I kept kind of like in my mind making like excuses why it would work, even though, I could tell it wasn't right. So thank you for listening to my confessions today. Hopefully it didn't discourage you from subscribing to my channel or giving this video a thumbs up, but just let you know that we all have things that we're not doing great all the time, and we don't always want to admit it or talk about it, but it's part of having your own business. All right, I will see you guys next week with a new video. Thank you so much. Bye.